Hello, everyone. Many news sources today are covering the deadliest attack on Kyiv by Russia. Reuters earlier reported the death toll of 25. It is now up to at least 27 and over 90 people injured. And as it often the case, this is probably going to go up because the rescue workers are still digging through the rubbles, are still working their way through the city, trying to help out. And so as this progresses, the number of casualties frequently goes up. Once again, vicious due to its losses and being fought to a standstill at the front line and being driven into a gas crisis, oil and gas crisis, instead of pausing to think why this is happening and that maybe they should end the war, get the fuck out of Ukraine and go tend to their own country, what do Russians do? Terrorize Ukrainian civilians. And what did they hit? No military targets of any kind. They hit residential buildings. As they, of course, lied that they were only targeting military, quasi-military targets. That is a lie. When these attacks occur, what they hit is businesses, schools, kindergartens, hospitals, apartment buildings, and so on and so forth. They're just a bunch of liars. And yeah, unfortunately, right now, there is nobody in Russia who would challenge Putin directly. Much like what we're struggling with here in the United States, that while people are outraged by what this administration is doing, including people who voted to bring this into power, our parts of the government who have the power to remove this administration are refusing to act. Now, Russians are not that far into their indignation with their government yet. So, we'll see. But I agree with what Zelensky said, because this is what a lot of people are thinking. Putin is losing this war. That's what's happening. He understands that the only thing he can do is intimidate people and simply kill civilians with missile strikes. And that is exactly what he's doing. And yes, there was a statement that is very angry, and deservedly so, when he said that if our partners had delivered what they promised on time, I think we could have saved more homes and, frankly, more lives. What he's referring to is the air defense systems. Ukraine would need at least 140 Patriot missiles to intercept an attack that involves 70 ballistic missiles. And this conversation is not new. That has been taking place for years now, not even months, years. The one thing that Ukraine doesn't have of its own is this, an equivalent of the Patriot air defense missiles. Got the drones, and the drone part of it is getting better too. But haven't got the air defense missiles. That is harder to develop, harder to put into production, harder to build, harder to ship, and it's expensive. That said, what has Russia gotten for its trouble? Record casualties. At this time, the number 2 million is mentioned by multiple sources when talking about the total casualties. Now remember, the casualties is not just people killed. Casualties include killed, wounded, and missing in action. Okay? So, at this point, like I said, the number 2 million is mentioned. And once again, Russia is scrambling to get more bodies to the front line. I mean, after 4.5 years, I think it had occurred to a lot of people that, unlike what they were told in the beginning of this, Ukrainians are not stupid, they're not lazy, they're not laid back, they're not non-confrontational, and they're going to fight like crazy, which is what they have done so far. And nobody wants to go into the meat grinder anymore. And so now Russian military recruitment is reduced to basically grabbing people off the streets. And yeah, there's still rumors for a mass mobilization, possibly in the fall. But again, the question is, who's going to show up? Now, here's the thing. So in the past, people were lured by generous financial incentives and the so-called death benefits. So when somebody got killed at the front, their families were compensated. There are now multiple stories of women remarrying second or even a third time after their previous husband or husbands were killed at the front to keep the money flowing. And no, I don't like that either. That is an embarrassment to all women, the world over, but it is what it is. So we'll see. And again, for me, the question to people of Russia is, aren't you tired of this shit? You realize that none of this benefits you in any shape or form. There's literally no reason for you to be doing anything in Ukraine. Ukraine is none of your business. It's not your country. It's not your land. And frankly, whatever positive feelings Ukrainians had toward Russians in the past, that is all gone. You will not be welcome there. Not for decades, possibly longer. There is some progress on the £40 billion aid fund from NATO. Again, Ukraine is trying to plead with NATO allies to streamline the process, because every hour, every day of delay means more lives lost, just like they were lost in Kyiv. And just because Ukraine had managed to hold off Russia for this long and seriously kick some ass in a lot of areas, doesn't mean any of this is easy, or doesn't mean that any of this should be taken for granted. And that is definitely a concern. You can't just look at Ukraine and say, oh, well, they're doing well on their own. No. They have been a buffer between you, Europe, and NATO, and Russia for many years now. No, you can't just say, oh, they're doing fine on their own. Meanwhile, Ukraine continues to Ukraine. 13 Russian power stations have been shut down across the occupied areas. Basically, we talked about this. What Ukrainian military is doing right now is making the occupied parts of Ukraine unbearable to the Russian military. That includes Crimea, that includes occupied parts of my native Zaporizhia region, that includes the portions of the Donetsk, Luhansk regions. They're making it too hot to hold on to. They're making their lives miserable. Look at the at this point, nearly blockaded Crimea. This is the effect that they're looking for everywhere where we have presence of the Russian troops. Make it unbearable. More to come.